It's all about the boss. It's all about what you can do for me. It's a fear-based leadership, and that just begins this journey that's entirely about lies.
It is Monday, December 10th, and this is Fox and Friends First, happening right now at 4 a.m. here on the East Coast. President Trump blasting leaking James Comey following the ousted FBI boss's testimony on Capitol Hill. How Democrats are now taking out the pitchforks, pushing for jail time for the president. And another weekend of violent riots in France. What is expected today as President Emmanuel Macron finally breaks his silence. Plus, the shocking new scene showing just how far migrants will go just to get onto U.S. soil, even shoving a baby through a border fence. Fox and Friends First starts right now. Through several states, affecting people, 300,000 or so without power. We're going to talk more about that coming up and take you to the scene. Good morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Monday morning. I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for starting your day and your week with us. Let's begin with President Trump, though. It's been a busy weekend, slamming James Comey after the fired FBI director's closed-door transcripts are released. And now Comey is firing back, making some strong suggestions related to Robert Mueller's Russia probe. Griff Jenkins is live for us in Washington with the very latest. So, Griff, just one or two things happening this weekend.
Just a little bit. Good morning, Heather. Yeah, and you know, this feud between the president and his former FBI director is showing no signs of slowing down anytime soon. At a forum in New York City Sunday, Comey blasted Republicans for wasting his time, compared President Trump to a mafia boss, and suggested he was a co-conspirator in the indictment of his former attorney, Michael Cohen.
Not in the formal sense that he's been named in an indictment, but if he's not there, he's certainly close, given the language in the indictment, in the filing, that the crimes were committed at his direction.
Now, this comes after the transcript of Friday's nearly 7-hour hearing is released over the weekend, prompting President Trump to unleash a Twitter storm on Comey Sunday morning, saying leaking James Comey must have set a record for who lied the most to Congress in one day. His Friday testimony was so untruthful. This whole deal is a rigged fraud headed up by dishonest people who would do anything so that I could not become president. They are now exposed. In another tweet, the president pointing out that the transcript shows Comey unable to remember or recall details in more than 200 questions. Meanwhile, top Democrats appear very determined to increase the pressure on the president, raising the prospect of impeachment and the possibility of an indictment followed by jail time, according to incoming House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
And Heather, we're far from done. Comey has agreed to a second hearing, which we expect to be at the beginning of next week as Republicans rush to the end of the year now before Democrats take control of the House in January.
Goodness gracious, before the end of the year. Seems like a long time away with all that is going to take place between now and then. Thank you so much, Griff. We appreciate it. Well, the conservative author accused of lying under oath to special counsel Robert Mueller's investigators now suing Robert Mueller over alleged grand jury leaks and illegal surveillance. Jerome Corsi filing a federal suit claiming that Mueller intended to, quote, coerce, extort, and blackmail him. Corsi filing a criminal complaint against Mueller detailing how his team allegedly forced him to lie under oath and commit other violations like witness tampering. He's seeking $350 million in damages. Well, President Trump considering North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows as his next chief of staff. That's according to Axios. Now, this comes days after the president announced that John Kelly would be leaving his post at the end of the year. The vice president's chief of staff, Nick Ayers, was thought to be in the running, but announced he, too, would be leaving at the end of the year. President Trump says that he's still interviewing candidates and will make a decision soon. Well, while President Trump is in the process of selecting General John Kelly's replacement, Fox News contributor Lisa Booth points out the news challenges presented by a Democrat-controlled House, which is something that she says the White House needs to strongly consider before selecting the next chief of staff.
I think the chief of staff job is going to be a little bit different with a Democrat-controlled House. I mean, you're going to be facing investigation after investigation. Democrats have already signaled that. Nadler said that these recent developments with the Mueller investigation could potentially mean impeachment for President Trump, or at least it's potentially impeachable regarding the campaign finance issue. So there's going to be it's going to be a whole different ballgame this next Congress. So the chief of staff needs to be ready and prepared to deal with that. I also think it's probably tough for President Trump to try to attract talent right now. Anyone that gets involved with the Trump orbit ends up getting destroyed by the media, or at least the media seeks to destroy them. Jeff Sessions was labeled as a racist. You look at the treatment of anyone surrounding President Trump. Sarah Sanders screamed out of a restaurant. So I do think that kind of behavior, both from the media and the left, does impact decision-making of people wanting to go work for the White House.
Well, the shakeup is seen as the beginning stage for President Trump's 2020 campaign, and we're going to talk more about that coming up. Well, the Senate looking to confirm William Barr for Attorney General just weeks before Democrats take control of the House. And Rand Paul saying now that he is, quote, disturbed over President Trump's replacement pick for Jeff Sessions, the Republican Kentucky senator questioning Barr's views on privacy.
I'm concerned that he's been a big supporter of the Patriot Act. I haven't made a decision yet on him, but I can tell you the first things that I've learned about him being for more surveillance of Americans is very, very troubling.
But Senator Lindsey Graham is showing strong confidence in the nominee.
Unless there's something really strange, 100%. He's been confirmed 3 times. There's never been a recorded vote because he's that highly qualified.
Barr served as late President George H.W. Bush's Attorney General. If confirmed, he replaces acting AG Matthew Whitaker. With the clock ticking down in Congress, Republican lawmakers are now racing to load up the end-of-year spending bill with their own priorities, including President Trump's border wall. Todd Piper joins us now live with the last-ditch effort to push their agenda while they control both chambers as migrants continue to go to the extremes just to get onto U.S. soil. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning to you, Heather. Despite the stopgap spending bill signed by President Trump on Friday, a number of other bills remain unfinished, including, of course, the one that deals with border wall funding. But the clock's a ticking. The president will meet with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi tomorrow to try and work out a deal. But with Democrats saying they can only give $1.6 billion for border security, the impasse is threatening a partial government shutdown if there's no compromise in 2 weeks. Some Republicans like Lindsey Graham say the president needs to stand his ground.
Here's the problem. You got the Democratic leader to be in the House calling border security a wall component immoral. After the caravan, if you don't see the need for additional border security, you're just not paying much attention. So, Mr. President, dig in, do not give in when it comes to the wall.
Some Democrats, though, like Karen Bass, say there's no need for a wall.
I think it's completely unnecessary. You know, there are several bills that need to pass, not just the one dealing with the border. And those bills have been negotiated on a bipartisan basis. I don't think a border wall is exactly the type of infrastructure that is going to help the U.S. economy. We have bridges that have fallen.
All this as we see more images like this, a father pushing his 8-month-old son under a crudely dug hole to the U.S. side. For a 4th consecutive month, the number of migrant families apprehended trying to cross illegally reached a record high. More than 25,000 families detained on the U.S.-Mexico border in November. Heather?
Yeah, we're going to talk more about what needs to get done in this lame duck session coming up. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, Todd. Well, Democrats aren't budging on the budget despite the president's calls to fund the wall. Former Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz has experienced the partisan gridlock in Washington firsthand and predicts the president will be on the winning side of this debate.
I think it's a very real threat because I think the president's wanting his $5 billion. It's embarrassing. The Republicans weren't able to produce that when they had the House and Senate and the presidency. They spent $8 trillion over those 2 years, and they couldn't come up with $5 billion. It's an embarrassment. I think the president's serious about this, but I also think that all bad bills that pass within 7 days of Christmas. I think the president's on the winning side of this. They want to protect the security of the United States of America. America. And all these graphics and all these things you see of people coming north, I think those Republicans will claim victory, but I think those in the middle will understand the president's trying to protect the United States.
Well, 5 out of the 12 annual spending bills have already been passed, leaving Congress to pass 7 more by December 21st. Let's talk about the markets. Markets are set to reopen today after a wild week on Wall Street. The Dow plunging more than 1,000 points with uncertainty over U.S.-China trade. A White House trade supervisor, Peter Navarro, says the tariffs are not to blame.
I think that's a false narrative in terms of the impact of the tariffs on the stock market. My view is that this is strictly an interest rate effect. I think the Fed went too far, too fast, and what we saw basically was a little asset reallocation from the stock to the bond market.
Navarro says the focus should be on progress between President Trump and the Chinese president. The two reached a 90-day trade truce during the G20 summit this month. We're turning now to the NFL. The Chicago Bears defense shuts down the LA Rams 15-6. The Browns hand the Carolina Panthers their 5th straight loss. The final 26-20. Wasn't pretty. And the Steelers coming up short, too, against the Oakland Raiders. The kicker botching a last-second field goal attempt to tie the game. Pittsburgh loses 24-21. But you got to talk about this. This was huge. Might be the play of the year. A miracle in Miami. Watch.
And this will end it after the shovel, or will it? Miami running around, circling. Oh, look out! Gronkowski didn't have the angle.
It was awesome, and he won that incredible play as the Dolphins stunned the Patriots, winning on that play, 34-33. It was an amazing game, and yes, winning over the Patriots, just to repeat it one more time. Well, the time now is about 12 minutes after the top of the hour, and the Comey transcripts, they are out. So what did we learn from them? Did we learn anything? Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton shares his biggest takeaways. Don't miss it. Up next. Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. Lawmakers sifting through more than 200 pages of transcripts from former FBI Director James Comey's marathon testimony. So, what did we learn? Joining me now to break it all down is the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you were up late last night, going to be a very busy day again today, so we appreciate your time. Let's get right to it, though. Some of the main takeaways, one of them obviously was that James Comey didn't appear to remember a lot, or he didn't know a lot to begin with. I don't know which it is, but he said, I don't know, at least 156 times, amongst a lot of other variations of that. So what's your take away from that?
Well, it wouldn't be so bad if he professed ignorance on minor topics, but he professed ignorance on a lot of key aspects of the FISA, the details about, for instance, who funded it, because he signed off on at least one of the FISA warrants that targeted Carter Page and the Trump team, and he professed not to know much about the origins beyond what he read in the newspapers later. And, you know, that's concerning given that a review of the partial FISA applications that have been released in Judicial Watch's lawsuits show that the courts were misled, that they were told that this FISA, the dossier, for instance, had origins in a political opposition to President Trump, but the court wasn't told that the Clinton campaign was behind it.
And let's go to this next point that came out in these pages and pages of testimony, that the anti-Trump dossier was, in fact, unverified.
Yeah, he confirmed what we already knew, that it was minimally corroborated. Remember, Devin Nunes concluded that in his report earlier this year, and he was excoriated by the left for saying that, but it's true. It was minimally corroborated when they first applied to the courts and when it was renewed. And as best I know, it still's minimally corroborated. And remember, the dossier was used by, created with the help of Russia Intel, according to Fusion GPS. So it looks like a smear operation by the Russians through the Clinton camp, with the willing help of the FBI and, frankly, now the Mueller operation.
And that's specifically important, the issue of verification, because intel sources say that presenting a single unverified fact, that throws into account this whole Woods procedure, which needs to be followed in order for this FISA to be granted.
You know, it's one thing to say, hey, look, we like this source, but if they can't find substantiation for what the source is telling them, and they're not telling the court that, that's a real problem.
Okay, so let's move to the next one. The 4 Americans that were apparently under investigation, but not President Trump.
Yeah, so that is important. Those were all people associated with the Clinton campaign, the Trump campaign. They include Carter Page, Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, and the 4th name's escaping me. James Comey tried to pretend just because we're targeting 4 people on the Trump campaign doesn't mean we're targeting the Trump campaign. Who's he kidding? And of course, Carter Page was spied upon later in the year.
Yeah, so let's move to the 4th one. He defended the FBI agent, Peter Strzok. He said there was no indication of bias. You just said, you know, who are you kidding? You could probably say that here, too.
Yeah, well, he said that if he was on this is what's really frustrating, because he said if he knew what the texts were at the time, he would have pulled him off the Clinton and the Russia case. But then later, he said it was a conspiracy theory that Strzok was pro-Clinton and anti-Trump. So he wants to have it both ways. And it shows you that Mr. Comey may have some Strzok problems, too, given his biases.
But he's not friends with Robert Mueller. He pointed that out. He said he doesn't have his personal cell phone number, said he hasn't been over to his house, said he's not friends with Robert Mueller. What do you think about that?
You know, there was a Washington Post story not too long ago talking about them being brothers in arms. They're close professionally, and it doesn't matter in the sense that Comey and Mueller had a professional relationship, and Mr. Comey specifically leaked information to get a special counsel going, and now Mueller is using Comey as his witness. And people are concerned about the conflicts legitimately, since they had this long and close working relationship.
And Tom, you're testifying before Congress on December 13th, correct?
Yes, this Thursday on the Clinton Foundation issue. This is the hearing that had been put off a few weeks, and we'll see what happens. But we broke open the Clinton Foundation pay-to-play scandal.
Well,
Glad to see Congress finally getting
I'm sorry
to
to cut you off. We'll be right back. Making America great again. It may be 2 years until the next presidential election, but President Trump's team is already hitting the ground running, looking ahead to 2020. Peter Doocy has a look at how they are attracting new support.
In Trump world, officials are trying to figure out how to make America great again. The 2020 election is still nearly 2 years away, but the Trump team has already streamlined resources with the Republican National Committee. Campaign COO Michael Glassner tells Fox no one can energize and turn out voters better than President Trump, and the RNC is the best partner to help us identify these voters.
We were able to identify that about 1/3 of the rally goers were midterm election voters. We were able to identify those 2/3 who were not, strategically reach out to them, gather their information at the rally, reach out to them in the aftermath, and ensure that they casted their absentee ballot.
And at a Trump rally, Secret Service restrictions mean that potential new supporters have nowhere to go for hours. But the GOP doesn't just want their data, they want their digits.
Now, this phone is how we connect with you. It's how we turn you into the army of Trump.
Democrats are reportedly at odds about the best way to keep up with Republicans. Politico reports Democrats at war over trove of voter data.
I'm old enough to remember when we, as Democrats, thought we had a significant advantage ahead of the 2016 election, and lo and behold, we were sort of lapped by the Republican operation.
But some stats show that nothing digital has the same impact as the Donald.
The president went on the ground, rallied for Josh Hawley. In the aftermath, Josh Hawley's support went up by +3. The president's approval rating in that area went up by +11.
At the White House, Peter Doocy, Fox News.
Well, Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is doubling down on his anti-Trump position.
I've said and I've declared that Chicago will be a Trump-free zone. And I stand by that because I think the policies that he's advocated are quite divisive.
The former chief of staff to Barack Obama telling Democrats to essentially ignore the president. He says they need to focus on doing the work they were elected to do. And Joe Biden's cross-country tour taking him to Bernie Sanders' stomping grounds over the weekend. The former vice president stopping in Vermont to promote his new book. Biden is considered a possible 2020 Democratic candidate for president. The 76-year-old says that he promised his late son that he would stay engaged, telling the Vermont crowd, quote, "When my life is finished, I want to be able to say I kept my commitment to Beau." Biden says that he's still thinking about a presidential run. Well, a Fox News alert for you. French President Emmanuel Macron set to address his country today after another weekend of violent protest in Paris, the damage already done in the City of Lights. And Vice President Pence's chief of staff, Nick Ayers, is out of the running. So who are the top contenders to replace Chief of Staff John Kelly? We'll take a look at the short list up next. It's half past the top of the hour. This Fox News alert for you. French President Emmanuel Macron expected to break his silence today amid violent protests sweeping the nation. What started as a backlash to a fuel tax is now a furious referendum on economic policies. Greg Palcott is in Paris with the violence.
Here in Paris, another weekend of riots. The people of France are upset and shaken up. Shopkeepers and residents picking up the pieces from those riots. Over 2,000 people were arrested nationwide. 264 were injured, including 39 police officers. And the damage was widespread. In last week's riots alone, there was over $1 billion worth of damage. We were in for most of the day on Saturday. It went into the night, and it was ugly. Police clashing with anti-government protesters. The bulk of the so-called yellow vest protesters coming from the French heartland, middle class, with a punch from militants from the left and right. Remember, this all started out as anger over government hikes in gas taxes, and then it just morphed into a broad attack on taxation and a government felt to be out of touch with the people. Now, except for a tweet praising the police, this country has not heard anything from its leader, President Emmanuel Macron. The government has given some ground. They're expected to give more. By the way, President Trump has been saying a few derogatory things through tweets about President Macron and what he claims to be faulty environmental policy, which has led to this upset. Well, we heard from the French foreign minister on TV in an interview. He said, and I quote, "Leave our nation be." In Paris, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
And we'll continue to follow that. But from France to Israel now. Israel uncovering another Hezbollah terror tunnel dug from Lebanon. It is the second cross-border tunnel discovered since Israel started searching for passageways used by the Iranian-backed group. The Israeli military put explosives inside to stop Hezbollah from getting through. Officials say the militant group has built an underground network to sneak into Israel. Well, British Prime Minister Theresa May could pull the plug on Parliament's Brexit vote hours before it's set to happen. British media outlets report that May could delay Tuesday's vote anytime tonight. UK leaders have blasted the plan, vowing to vote it down. This as an EU court issues a major ruling saying the UK can cancel its Brexit plans should it choose to without permission from other EU nations. And Senator Lindsey Graham telling President Trump to stand firm on his $5 billion funding request for the border wall.
If I were the president, I would dig in and not give in on additional wall funding. After the caravan, if you don't see the need for additional border security, you're just not paying much attention. So, Mr. President, dig in, do not give in when it comes to the wall.
Well, the president will meet with top Democrats tomorrow to discuss border security funding, and we'll talk more about that coming up a little bit later. Well, the dramatic scenes playing out along the border are adding energy to the president's calls for immigration reform. And as Fox News contributor Lisa Booth points out, the wall is a good start, but it's not the only solution.
We saw really at the southern border when you had 1,000 migrants trying to rush the southern border, a visualization of why the wall is needed, why we need that deterrent. And what I am confused about is if we have 22 million illegal immigrants living here in the United States right now, and neither party can figure out what to do with those individuals, why would we not try to stop the flow of additional illegal immigrants that we're not going to know what to do with? So I think the wall is needed at the southern border, but it's even beyond that. It's also changes to what's broken with our asylum system, how easy it is to at least pass that initial test for asylum coming over to the United States, and then also laws like the Flores Decree and a 2008 anti-human trafficking law loophole in that. So I think it's even broader than just a wall. It's also trying to get some of these immigration legislative fixes.
Well, last week, the Pentagon announced the troops stationed across Texas, Arizona, and California will remain there through January. You might have heard about this. President Trump looking for a new chief of staff after announcing General John Kelly will step down by the end of the year. In a late-night tweet, the president says he's interviewing potential replacements after rumored frontrunner Nick Ayers confirmed it will not be him. Who else is on the short list? Here to discuss is GOP strategist and former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Claffey. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's begin with Nick Ayers' tweet that he sent out. He actually thanked the president. He said, "Thank you at Real Donald Trump, at VP, and my great colleagues for the honor to serve our nation. At the White House, I will be departing at the end of the year, but we'll work with the MAGA team to advance the cause, #Georgia," because he said, of course, his reason for bypassing the job is to go back home to Georgia, spend some time with his young family there instead. Some of the list that's going around. Let's begin with Congressman Mark Meadows, according to Axios. What do you think about him, his name on the list, pluses and minuses? Give us your take.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to remember here that, one, John Kelly has done a fabulous job in this role, and it's very common for chief of staffs to be cycled through in administrations. President Obama had 5 during his 8 years, and they usually just signal a shift in priorities for the administration. They can focus on different priorities that they need at that moment. So when we're discussing each of these candidates, it's really just it's to see how well they're going to jive with the president and how well they're going to work with him first and foremost. But most importantly, they have a real battle coming up with the Democratic House coming in and the investigations that they know are going to be taking place. So they do need someone a little bit more political in that role, and someone who has a little bit more familiarity with how Congress is going to be approaching the next 2 years.
So Mark Meadows, Republican congressman from North Carolina, is currently the chairman of the Conservative Freedom House Caucus.
Yes. So he makes a lot of sense, right? He's currently in the House. He obviously has that background. And he is head of the Freedom Caucus, which obviously aligns very well with what the president believes in and what he hopes to achieve, during his presidency. So he doesn't have as much management experience. So that's going to be a challenge for him coming in and having to, push through and work with the White House staff to make sure that the legislative agenda of the president still maintains. But he is a fabulous choice in the regard that he does have a huge familiarity with what Congress is going to be doing and obviously intimately knows those members.
What about some of the challenges coming up? What would be the benefit of Steve Mnuchin, who's currently obviously the Treasury Secretary?
So he has already established a record of success, right? He pushed through tax reform and worked with the White House very closely on that. And also the performance of the economy can be attributed to him. He works very well with the Fed and keeping everything on track. And so that has been a huge plus for this administration is the performance of the economy. President Trump is very proud of that. And most importantly, he's managed a large agency. He has the respect of White House staff and the president. And that's going to be really important for this next role, is someone who understands how the president works and can speak very honestly and truthfully to him about what is going on a daily basis and help him make tough decisions and stay focused.
Yeah, we know one of the huge battles coming up is going to be that of the budget. Mick Mulvaney, current budget director, possibly taking over this role.
Yeah, you know, he's kind of a combination of the two, right? I mean, he has a previous track record with this administration of doing well and performing. He, you know, took over the multiple roles within the White House and really has been a pinch hitter for them in regards to budget issues and pushing forward a reorganization of the White House, of the executive branch, consolidating agencies, those types of things, looking for efficiencies. So he has the respect and he also has the success in the administration, but he's also a former congressman. Right? He came from that.
Yeah, and then finally, Robert Lighthizer, U.S. Trade Representative.
So I think that he does a great job in regards to he's pushing through very difficult and politically fraught trade agreements, and he's having some success in it. And I think that has endeared him to the White House and to the president in particular, that he's really stood the course and has proven his loyalty and success in his trade agreements.
I like how you phrase that. Politically fraught trade agreements. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. A lot to get through. We appreciate it. And we will be right back. Stay with us.
Reuters is reporting that Amazon is looking to expand its cashierless checkout stores to airports, and it could really help those on-the-go travelers who are really usually rushing to get where they need to be. But Amazon reportedly evaluating some top U.S. airports for these stores. Amazon Go since January has opened 7 locations in Chicago, San Francisco, and Seattle. So what you do when you enter, you scan your app at the turnstile, you enter, cameras and sensors keep track of everything you buy, and then when you leave, you can just walk out and you are billed to the credit card that you have on file with Amazon. So I think this could really work at airports. It's a great idea.
All right, kind of like the movie theater. Don't really need a cashier there anymore either.
Yes, so coming in on top this weekend in U.S. box offices, Ralph Breaks the Internet, bringing in $16.1 million for a third weekend in a row. But overseas, this could be an indication of what we could see coming up in the U.S. for the holiday forecast. Take a look.
The only way to stop this war is for you to take your rightful place as king.
Trust me, I am no king.
That is Aquaman, and opened up in China this weekend. $93.6 million, becoming the #1 film globally from one market alone. So this could really forecast what type of holiday season we could have at the box office here in the U.S. Aquaman opens up in North America December 21st. So that's going to be a big one.
I can't wait to see that one. Yes. All
Looks
right.
good.
It does. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Heather.
Well, coming up, lame ducks in a row. GOP leaders now rushing to pass key legislation before handing the House over to the Democrats. So will the left ever come to the table? We'll debate up next.
Liner. Well, to be clear, it's an invisible liner from Smile Direct Club. Our liners take teeth like these and transform them into those.
All weekend, hundreds and thousands left in the dark digging out this morning. Thousands of flights canceled. Amber Roberts from our Fox affiliate in Charlotte, North Carolina, is live in Hickory, North Carolina. Amber, thank you for joining us bright and early this morning. How is it out there right now?
Well, good morning, Heather. Lots of issues here across North Carolina. Here in Hickory, we are dealing with more than a feet of snow. The big problem right now, the roadways, they look completely covered with white snow. And drivers out here are having problems navigating all of the roadways here in Hickory, and across the Carolinas. Now, we do know that crews are working to the hardest extent that they can to get the roadways in better conditions for drivers, but we do know drivers are still having issues. According to first responders here in the Hickory area where I'm at right now, they have responded to nearly 80 accidents, and they also had more than 300 calls. Those calls coming in from Sunday morning until Monday morning, this morning actually. So those are the driving conditions across North Carolina. Regarding outages, we are dealing with thousands. We also know that people are trying their best to deal with this weather event, but it's going to take a lot of time to clean up the Carolinas. Back to you, Heather.
Yeah, I know at least one fatality reported so far, a result of a fallen tree onto a car. Hopefully everyone down there stays safe. Hickory, North Carolina, where all my relatives are hopefully staying safe right now. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, let's talk about House Republicans. They are now racing against the clock to pass their agenda before handing over control to Democrats. So with border wall funding and criminal justice reform hanging in the balance, a whole another storm to talk about. Will Democrats come to the table? Here now to debate is Democratic strategist Robin Biro and Republican strategist Ash Wright. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get into this long list right away. This GOP end-of-year agenda. Pass Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, pass criminal justice reform, pass a farm bill, confirm a number of President Trump's judicial nominees, amongst a lot of other things. I mean, the list is ongoing. How in the world are they going to get this accomplished? Is it even possible? Robin, I'll start with you.
It is. We're going to have a little trouble with my party, just being completely honest and transparent, when it comes to border wall funding. Because President Trump said so many times in the campaign trail that Mexico would pay. So as long as we can start talking about where this money is going to come from, and as long as we're going to be good stewards of that money, I don't think we'll have a problem. In that regard, I don't want my party to be completely obtuse with this issue, because it would be intellectually dishonest considering the tremendous bipartisan support we had in 2006 with the Secure Fence Act. On all of these other issues, though, I think we're going to be able to come to the table and reach some agreements, Heather.
Well, Ash, what do you think? I mean, Robin seems very positive. He seems willing to, reach across the aisle. Do you think other Democrats will be willing to do the same?
Well, I hope so. But, I think on the Republican side, they're going to have to start making compromises and change their viewpoint. So right now, Republicans for years have been able to force Democrats to compromise with them, and they need to change that mindset and begin to compromise with Democrats on infrastructure, with, hopefully the meeting with Schumer and President Trump on Friday goes well, and then that might help bring Democrats closer to the $5 billion for border security funding and the criminal justice bill.
So 7 of the government spending bills remain unfinished at this point, Robin. And then in terms of what Ash was just saying, and able to reach a compromise, do you think that would work?
Yes, and the climate is right at this particular moment in time for us to come to the table with some type of compromise. And with all these newly elected people that are going to be coming into office, it's the perfect time, perfect momentum for us, because they've got to be able to be seen as working together to actually get something done. Because that's what why Congress has such a low polling factor right now, and it's got to change, or they're going to be ushered right out in 2 years.
Moving away from border wall funding to criminal justice reform, Ash, in terms of reaching a compromise there, do you think it's possible?
I think it's possible. I mean, obviously, time has been this Senate and this Congress's worst enemy, and so hopefully they reach that compromise sooner, before the Friday meeting, before they talk about border wall. Hopefully the Senate can pass something on criminal justice and then send it over to the House to make it a little easier on Congress to come to a compromise. But I think it's possible. Is it likely? I don't know, but it's definitely possible today.
Robin, final word.
We know that President Trump wants this, and this is something the Democrats, as far as criminal justice reform goes, this is something that we've wanted for a long time. So honestly, on this issue and infrastructure, I think we've got it. The others are a little bit more gray, but I think we're making good progress.
Yeah, it does seem like that would be one that would be able to, come together fairly quickly, if they don't add other things to it. All right, thank you both for joining us. Appreciate it, Robin, Ash. Have a good day. Well, the time now is about 6 minutes until the top of the hour. Package thefts like this are common this time of year, except please say this thief is under 10 years old. Wait until you hear who's really behind it. Stay with us.
You've been hit by a smooth criminal.
On a pair of Tascam headphones, just